All right. Hey guys, how's everybody doing out there in computer land, radio land, TV land, whatever we want to call it? Hope everybody's having a great day. We got everybody logging on right now, so we'll give just a minute or two to let a few more people get on, and we'll get going on this class today. Have a really good class for you on buying profitable rental properties. And I think you should walk away with a lot on this, and that's exactly my goal, is to make sure I give you guys some very good education and at least show you what I'm doing anyhow out there, and give you some great positives. As always, I don't have a slide for my disclaimer, but I'm not going to be giving you any legal advice or accounting advice in this, even though we will be talking about numbers. We're going to be talking about how I do my numbers and how I've done my deals. But if you need any legal advice or accounting advice, please get with a professional and get professional advice from them. Everything I'm going to be teaching you and showing you today is based on exactly what I do and how I buy rental properties. So if you choose to buy rental properties, which I think is a great thing for everybody to do, please always do your due diligence on any deal before you jump into it, and know what you're getting into. There's a lot of great deals that we can do out there, great opportunities, and I want to see everybody go out and be able to take advantage of that for yourselves in every way that you can. So let's go ahead and get started. We got time going here, and we've got so buying profitable rental properties. Why would you pay more for a rental property that you want to keep and turn into a rental property? And why would you buy that any differently than the way you would buy a property that you want to flip? Now, I know that this seems to be a big thing that goes on out there that's advertised. People are always advertising their properties. ARV's this, and you can buy it for a flip property, and your rehab's going to be one price, and your rental rehab's going to be another price. And I totally disagree with that method. We're investors. We're trying to buy profitable deals in all aspects out there. And I think, for myself, I run my numbers the same way, whether I'm going to flip a property or I'm going to keep it as a rental property. I think that's really, really important to keep your numbers the same. That doesn't mean we can't change our numbers based on certain situations, which we'll go into more detail here in a minute about that. But always start your numbers out the same way. I think that's really, really important. Build yourself a criteria and stick by that criteria unless you have a reason or the project tells you that you can change that number. Standard rent ratios. This is something that I use in every calculation that for a rental property. Anything I'm going to keep as a rental property, we want to hit certain rent ratios as well. And it just kind of, a lot of people don't even know what rent ratios are. I mean, I didn't know what that was for years. And even though people would mention it here or there, nobody really sat down and explained it to me. And I will explain that to you today, so you have a very good understanding of what a rent ratio is and what makes it so important to keep you profitable on rental properties. And then we're going to talk a lot about financing your rental properties. There's a lot of different ways we can finance rental properties, and as I think I'm going to show you in here, and for me personally, your financing plays a major role in the things that you can do and the way that you can buy. So that's very, very important. And there's a lot of different ways that you can finance, refinance, do a lot of things with rental properties. So we want to pay close attention to that. Have you decided what kind of rental properties that you would like to own? This is something that, people are all over the board with this. And I really think it's something that we should break down and think about, because there's a lot of different ways we can buy rental properties. There's lots of different types of rental properties. So, what fits for your personality? What kind of a situation are you in, to determine, what works better for a rental property for you. And to be quite honest, a lot of people always tell me that, when I ask them about, what kind of rental property do you want, they always want to buy rental properties around where they live. And that might not set up for good rental properties, for profitable rental properties. So you need to think about that. And I'm going to give you some ideas of how I do that, as we go through this. You need to think about areas of town where you might want to have rental properties. And for a good example, like where I live, where my personal house is, I have to go out pretty far to find what I would consider good profitable rental properties compared to my neighborhood. Just based on price range, and the numbers just don't work for the way I buy. And I think something that's even more important to think about is areas of town that you don't want to have rental properties. And this could be for a variety of reasons, depending on the type of rental property that you want to own. Certain parts of town lay out better than other parts of town. So just something that I really think that you should think about and put a lot of thought into as you're going through the process of trying to figure out if you want to be a landlord and you want to own rental properties. Like I said, I think it's a great thing to do. And I think most of you will agree with me by the time we get to the end of this presentation and this workshop. But these are things that I've always thought about going into the deal, long before I ever did the deal, doing my homework and my research, as we move forward in the process. What price range do you think you want to stay in for your rental properties? What ARV range is a good range for you? This is something that I think we really need to really take into consideration, because I think, I don't do what I consider high-end rental properties, and anything that I consider a high-end rental property was going to be a property that the ARV is, $200, $250, $300,000. But I know a lot of people that like those types of rental properties, but you'll never be able to hit the profits and the rent ratios that you need to hit when you get into those high dollar rental properties. The numbers just don't work from that standpoint. And I can say from my standpoint, my sweet spot for rental properties, my most favorite place to be with rental properties is the ARV between $80,000 and $120,000, maybe even $130,000. That's a real sweet spot for me, and that's a range that we can be very profitable with our rental properties, with those types of rental properties, with that ARV range. Now, that doesn't mean that we've got a few rental properties that ARV much higher than that. I think the highest rental property we've got with the ARV is about $215. But the reason that property works so well is because I bought it so cheap. This is a property we bought after Harvey, and I got it for $63,000. So you can see that my numbers still work very well because I was able to buy it so cheap. And so something to really think about in your ARV range as you're deciding where you want to go and neighborhoods you want to be in. Do you have a rehab budget that you want to stay in? This is something I come across a lot with a lot of people I talk to, and even with myself in the beginning. When I first bought rental properties, I thought I was doing great rehabs, and I was, my rehabs were $5,000 or $6,000. I was just doing glorified make readies, really is all I was doing. But I didn't know the process of what a real rehab was. But I come across a lot of investors that don't want to take on big repairs. They want properties that don't have these issues, where I'm just the opposite of that, and we'll get more into detail about that. But in the beginning, the first time I took on a property where I needed to put a roof on it, or I needed foundation repair or HVAC, to be quite honest about it, I was pretty nervous and scared because I'd never done that before. Excuse me. And that's something that, if you're not comfortable, and a lot of people aren't comfortable doing those kinds of repairs, maybe you have to move into that arena slowly, but kind of determine, what your repairs are that you're willing to do, and what you're afraid of. what you might need to get more education on, so you won't be afraid to do these repairs. Because I think as everybody knows, obviously the more beat up the property is, the cheaper we're going to buy it for. And so that's where all this plays together. All this comes in hand with what we're doing here. So how are you determining your ARV on a rental property? This is a slide we're going to spend a few minutes on, because this is really, really important, because I see this misrepresented all the time. It's like I was saying a minute ago about, we see a flyer come out for a property, and it'll say, ARV $150,000. If you want to flip it, it needs to be a $30,000 repair, or if you're going to keep it as a rental property, it's only a $10,000 repair. Now, I'm not disputing the fact that maybe you need to spend $30,000 to flip it, or $10,000 to keep it as a rental property. That may be very accurate, but what's not accurate is your ARV. If you're only going to put $10,000 into that property, you're not going to have $150,000 ARV that you would if you put $30,000 into it to flip it. But nobody ever changes that ARV number when they throw that scenario out there to you, and that's a big misrepresentation of what that deal really is. But if you don't know that, and you're thinking that ARV is still 150, a lot of people buy those deals, and the real problem comes is when you go to refinance that property out, and the bank, the lender that you're using, the first thing they do is send an appraiser out to the property, and the bank is going to go by what that appraiser tells them. But that appraisal won't come in at 150. It might come in at 130, 135. Who knows? It's up to that appraiser. But if you only put a small amount of work into that property, that's how the appraisal is going to turn out. And you may end up needing to bring a lot of money out of pocket to refinance that property. And at that point, you already own the property. You bought it. So you don't have a choice at that point. You have to move forward with that refinance, unless you can do something with your short-term money to work a deal out. But then again, if you're still using your short-term money, you're going to be paying a whole lot more on your interest probably. So keep in mind that the level of the rehab on a rental property will definitely determine the ARV of that rental property. Now, something else to think about beyond that is, if you need $30,000 in rehab to flip this property, what are the repairs needed? You really need to look at that if you're looking at this property, because if you're going to change floors out, whether it's a rental property or flip property, whether you're going to put laminate flooring in, vinyl plank, or tile, your cost is going to be a wash. There's not going to be much of a difference between any of that cost. So you're still going to have that cost. The reality is that even if you keep that as a rental property, you could very well be putting way more than $10,000 into that property. So something that's really important when you're looking at a deal, don't necessarily go by what someone tells you. I get sent tons of deals, and I believe everything that everybody sends me, but I always run my own comps, and I base my decisions off of my numbers, not their numbers. So really important that you think about that and make sure that you don't get yourself in trouble in that scenario. Something to think about with rental properties also is, are you buying rental properties for equity over time? Which I think is probably the most important thing to be looking at with a rental property. Or are you buying your rental properties based on monthly cash flow, like most of the gurus teach you out there, which I think is not a good way to look at it. And I go into more detail here in a minute. We'll explain that, why I say that. So be real sure of which direction you want to go. And it kind of goes hand in hand. Are you a value buyer or a momentum buyer? Now, as most people know me, I'm a value guy. I want to buy them beat up as I can. I want to pay as little as possible, and I want to bring that value back to that property and hopefully add value above and beyond where I'm at. I get the lowest prices when I buy like that. And if you want to be a momentum buyer, there's nothing wrong with that. A momentum buyer is going to be, you're going to be buying a property that is generally in much better condition, doesn't need all the repairs, and it's much more stable, maybe dollar-wise property. And this actually works really well when you're talking commercial apartments and stuff like that. Or since we're talking mostly single family right now, we'll stick with that. And momentum, you know, it can be good. There's nothing wrong with that. I've actually just picked up 3 properties last Friday, and they're actually all momentum plays because these houses have already been rehabbed. And I'll give you some more detail about that in a few slides down the road. But you know, so that's where I changed my pattern. On those properties, I'm not doing a value play. I'm doing a momentum play. But it's because the numbers worked for me to do that. And I'll show you those numbers here in a little bit as we move forward. That's something to think about. You know, what category are you comfortable in? Where do you fit? What's your personality? And not right or wrong, just know what you're going to do. Most of you have heard the horror stories about buying rental properties, and as a landlord for many, many years and many properties, I'm here to tell you that all those stories are true. There's a lot of horror stories about having rental properties. Tenants are a pain in the butt, no matter what. It's just the reality of rental properties. You have to be in the right mindset to have rental properties, especially if you're going to be doing the management. If you're going to be self-managing, you need to know that tenants are going to be calling you all the time. There's going to be complaints, there's going to be repairs, and you have to know how to accept that and deal with that. Have maintenance people in place, things of that nature. Or if you have a management company, know that they will hopefully take care of that, but all that comes at a cost. So, knowing the differences is very important. So now that you know the reality of that, then why would you want to buy rental properties? Why would you want to own rental properties? Well, owning rental properties is the fastest way to build wealth. And this is where I think it's important for us to really know what rental properties should be for. This is how I look at it. I think of my rental properties for building wealth. That is the most important part of the equation for me. And it's really, really kind of crazy to me because most of the time it's not taught that way. Most investors buy rental properties for the wrong reasons because they're taught the wrong way. The gurus don't talk about building wealth in many, many cases. I'm starting to hear that a little bit more, but they try to sell you on other things. They try to sell you on that cash flow. And I'm going to show you in a few slides just how you don't want to get caught up in that. So why do you want to own rental properties? As an individual, what are your reasons for wanting to own rental properties? And this is, these are some of the big things that are very important to me. Is I'm all about building that wealth and not building debt, which, I don't know if we'll get into that on this workshop, but like I said, this is a workshop that I've broken down that could be, it's a 2-day class actually, so we could go a lot of different directions. We've got to stay on track a little bit here. So buying rental assets, and a lot of people, if you already know me or you've heard me talk before, we've talked individually, and we talk about rental properties. You know that I talk about my rental properties as my assets. These are my rental assets. I don't call them rental properties. I call them my rental assets because that's how I look at it. It gives me, I put myself in a totally different mindset when I'm calling it an asset. And we just call it a rental property and it just kind of flies out there and we don't give it a lot of thought. But when we think about it as a rental asset, this is an asset that I am building a wealth off of. That means I'm going to take much better care of my assets in my mind. That's just how it works for me. And it's just, like I said, a lot of times with a lot of things we do in real estate, by changing the way we talk about it, the way we look at it a little bit, It changes our mindset just a little bit, but it helps give us much better momentum in how we perceive what we're doing and move forward, and we have better success that way. So just throwing that out there to you. But buying rental assets is the fastest way in real estate to build wealth, hands down. I've seen it done over the years by many who came before me, and the coaches and mentors that I follow still to this day, who have done extremely well buying rental assets and building wonderful rental portfolios. However, buying rental properties will not pay your monthly bills until you own a lot of them. And this is something I see people get hung up on all the time. Maybe not necessarily hung up on, but just maybe a misunderstanding because nobody explains this to them. And I've got some slides that will hopefully make this really, really clear to you and help you understand exactly what I'm talking about. You've got to have a lot of rental properties, and like so we've got a large rental portfolio now, but none of that money is to live off of at all. That money goes back into the properties. That money goes into accumulating wealth in those accounts where years that we do well and we don't have losses. So think about that. Sometimes I get people that disagree with me on that, and I've had people actually come and talk to me about that. I don't understand how it's not going to pay your monthly bills. But if you're out there and you already own some rental properties, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to go into a lot of different things that change the scenario in the reality of it than the gurus tell you. That's really, really important. So accumulating wealth, let's talk about that for a second. When I'm buying rental properties, I have a criteria for exactly how I want to buy properties and exactly what I want to do. And so it's really important for me I follow my criteria. I talk about that a lot with what we do. We have a plan set up for how we want to accomplish things, and we follow that plan. And so for me, every rental property that we buy, I want to have a minimum of $25,000 of equity in that property. And I've held very true to that in the 60 doors that we've got, and the 3 that I just picked up, and I'm gonna share those numbers with you here in just a second to help you understand this even a little better. And I'm just going to share from the equity standpoint. But putting $25,000 in equity every time you buy a property and you have $25,000 of equity in it, you're increasing your net worth by $25,000 on each property you do that with. And if you could go out and buy 10 properties like that in 1 year, in a 12-month period of time, you would increase your net worth by $250,000. Where else are you going to be able to go out and do that? What other investment can you put your money into that you could increase your net worth with equity, through equity like that? Nothing I know. And I have done this for many years. And like I said, this is my minimum. This is my minimum. So, and I've got properties we buy with a lot more equity than that than the 25,000. So I'm just going to share with you to help you understand this, how easy and how quickly you can do this, and how you can build a massive amount of net worth over 4 or 5 or 6 years if you do this consistently and you keep following your rules and you don't break your guidelines. So we just I put 3 of them under contract, all one seller, this past Friday. The first property, the ARV on this property is 110. So that falls right in my sweet spot, ARV 110. I'm buying this property for $69,000. This house has been totally rehabbed. It's got a brand new roof on it, paint, flooring, everything. This is a fully rehabbed house. So with that one property, if the ARV is 110 and I'm getting it at 69, that's $41,000 of equity I just put into my net worth. The second property, the ARV is 104. There again, we're right in my sweet spot. And I'm getting this property for $67,000. Fits right in my sweet spot. Same thing. House is in great shape. This one actually has a tenant that's moving out, but the house is in excellent shape. I just need to come in and clean it and put a tenant in it. I'll have a tenant in this house, in a week or two after we close on it. But with that property, that's $37,000 of equity that I'm putting into my net worth. And then the third property, the ARV is 85,000 on that one, and I'm getting that one for 60,000. And that one has $25,000 of equity. So when we get this closed in the next week or two, I will have just increased my net worth by $103,000 on these 3 deals with one seller. So if you could do that 10 times, you could blow that number out the door. These are 3 little tiny properties that, and I won't even go into rent ratio because the rent ratio on these are going to be fantastic as well. But my biggest concern is building that net worth. And I just think, and on 3 little properties, the most expensive one being $69,000. I'm going to increase my net worth by $103,000, boom, within a 2-week period. And, I still have a half a year to keep buying more properties and keep increasing that net worth. This is what you guys can do. This isn't rocket science, and I'm not a rocket scientist, but I have a criteria. I follow a plan, and I stick to it. I stick to my numbers. And it's really important that you do the same thing, and you'll have great success by doing that. Residual income. Let me get a drink here. Residual income. This is really, really important. As you add cash flowing properties to your portfolio, you add residual income to your income sheet. And what I mean by this is, when I was talking earlier about, people come to me all the time and say, hey, if I get 10 rental properties, I can quit my job. No, that's not going to happen. You're adding, you want to have profitable properties so you can keep putting money in the bank and adding that to your income sheet, because there's going to be things that happen, expenses that happen down the road that you're going to have money in the bank for. You still got your taxes, your insurance. There's a lot of cost involved. So you want to make sure you get cash flowing properties. I'm not talking about month-to-month cash flow or cash on cash return. I'm talking cash flowing properties. So you have money left at the end of the year. You have money in the bank when an air conditioner goes out. You got to put a roof on a house. All kinds of things can happen that do happen when you have rental properties. So assuming you could add a net profit of $100 a door per month, how many months do you think it would take you to be financially independent? This is more of the reality of what we should be looking at. We're not going to go out there and make millions of dollars off of 1 or 2 properties. And the reality is most landlords across the United States, the average, I think, is own maybe 3 properties. So yes, can you make some money off of them over time? That's the idea. But you're not going to become financially independent just owning a few rental properties. And $100 net profit a door, it's very for real number. It's a very for real number. And so I think you should really take that to heart. Think about that a little bit. It's a very, very for real number. Don't get caught up in the cash flow trap. And this is what I've been kind of leading up to. Rentals will provide incredible residual income after you have accumulated a large number of rental properties, providing you bought them with equity, providing because when you buy them with bigger equity, that's how we're creating more of a cash flow situation. Because you're buying them at a deeper discount. Your payments are much lower, and you're hopefully getting the rents. That we'll get into rent ratios here in a few minutes, and I can show you what I'm talking about with that. Now, this is kind of an example, and please understand this is only an example. There's a million different variables that could change these numbers based on price point you're buying houses at, ARVs, all kinds of things. But this is just to help you kind of understand that what I'm talking about. So in this example, for every 10 units you have paid off would equal about 60 plus fully leveraged properties that you have, properties you have mortgages on. And this number can go up and down depending on, like I say, a wide variety of different things, depending on different situations. But across the board, on an average, this is a very good scale to think about it like. Because when even though if you have 10 properties paid off, you still have to understand that you still have expenses that are going to come out of that monthly income that you've got coming in. You're still going to have taxes, insurance, repairs, vacancies, all that kind of stuff will still come into play, even if they are paid off. So if you're getting $1,200 a month rent, you're not going to net $1,200 still, because there of expenses that come out of that. I think most of you understand that, but sometimes I get people that don't quite get that. And so I also wanted to just kind of give this example and to help you kind of understand that and make it real clear to you. And like I had mentioned before, you are still going to need to have income producing activities that we do out there. If you're a full-time real estate investor, you're still going to need to wholesale properties. You're going to need to rehab properties to keep that monthly income coming in. If you've got a job, you want to build a rental portfolio and you've got a job, you need to keep that job until you can get a rental portfolio built out to where you can at some point have enough of them paid off, or have enough of them that are mortgaged that you are actually making money. Like I said, we've got a large rental portfolio. Our companies have made money the past couple of years, but that money stays in the company. That's not money to live off of. And you're not going to be living high on the hog either. But what my real goal with all those properties is to keep having pay down on them and keep building equity and having the values go up, the pay down go down. I'm very big on paying things off. I know other groups out there are all about keep, every 5 years, cash out refi. Well, I think that that's a wrong method to use, because all you're doing is accumulating debt. You're not building any wealth whatsoever. I want to build wealth. The only way I can do that is by paying things down and getting rid of payments. Your mortgage payments, your biggest expense that you're always going to have. And the more of those that you can eliminate, then you can start putting actually a lot more money in your pocket every month to build out something much bigger and better. So something very important to keep in mind. So let's talk about the cash flow trap. This is something that, if any of you out there have been to the gurus talking about rental properties, you've probably seen this example or something extremely similar to this example. This is not something that I invented by any means. And I can tell you that from all the gurus I've seen over the years, I have seen this very example. That's why I use it, because I've been shown it like tons and tons of times. And but I'm going to show you just how unrealistic it really is. But this is where we get caught up in the cash flow, or as the gurus call it, your cash on cash return. I don't know where that term came from, but it's been around a long time, and I just kind of chuckle every time I hear it, because the reality of it is it's really pretty silly when we think about it. But let's say we're getting $1,100 a month rent, and we're going to have a mortgage payment, taxes, and insurance. That I think everybody's very aware that comes right off the top in this when we have rental property. So That gives you a monthly expense of $700. But you're going to be told now your cash on cash return is $400 a month. Well, that's your gross based on this, this example. But there's so many things left out of this. And like I said, I talk to people that have rental properties all the time because it's a subject I talk about a lot. People ask me about my stuff, and I always get the same thing from landlords that actually have 1 or 2 or 3 properties. They're going, well, I don't know how come you got those numbers up there, because I'm sure not making that much money. And that's the reality of it. And if you're not making, if you don't have rental properties that you have a good amount of cash flow, monthly cash flow coming in to cover expenses, this is what happens. We're all the expenses that we're missing. And these are very, very for real expenses. Vacancy. We're going to have tenants that move in and move out. That's rental properties. When you put a tenant back in, you have to advertise somehow. And I know, a lot of the big gurus around town tell you to put a sign in the front yard. They tell you don't use a realtor. And oftentimes when you don't, it takes you longer to get a tenant in your property, which is just more lost collections. So when we have a vacancy, I've got a manager, and we use a number of different ways to get tenants in properties, but we also reach out to other realtors. And if I've got to pay that commission to put a tenant in there, I pay it and get that tenant in there as quickly as possible. But it's a very for real cost that you need to account for. Repairs. All rental properties, there's going to be repairs. You've got other people living in your assets, in your rental properties. There's going to be repairs. No way you can get around it. Doesn't matter how new your house is, how good the rehab is, there's going to be repairs. There will be maintenance over time, no matter what. There's always going to be maintenance. There's going to be capital improvements. Got to put a roof on the house. You're going to have evictions. If you have a good number of rental properties and you have them for over a period of time, at some point you're going to have to evict somebody. And when you evict somebody, you're going to have lost collections. That's just the way it goes. Or when somebody moves out, you have lost collections either way. And one of the expenses that hardly anybody accounts for is management, unless you have a manager. And and I'm guilty of it too. In the beginning, in the early years, when I self-managed my 5 or 6 properties, I never accounted for management cost. But if I go back and look at the reality of all the time I spent doing different things, putting tenants in them myself, screening tenants, doing some of the make-readies myself, there's definitely a cost that associated with that. And there's a lot of costs that I don't even have in here. End of the year, HOA dues, if you've got in a neighborhood that has HOA, which we've got about half of our portfolio in neighborhoods with HOAs. You've got to account for these expenses, which in that first example didn't account for that at all. There's nothing there. But and even to give you even more of an example of cost when it comes to something like this, let's say we have a tenant that moves out. We won't even say it's an eviction. A tenant moves out, so our rent was $1,100. So the month they move out, we just have a loss of collections of $1,100. Then we got to come in and do a make ready on that house. So let's say that make ready cost us a couple $1,000s to get done. We got to paint the whole house. There's some broken lights, different things. Spending $2,000 on a make ready, you can do that really quite easy. And then it takes you another month to get a tenant in there. So you have $1,100 lost collections. Now you have out-of-pocket expenses of $2,000, and now you have another month of lost collections. So you've lost another $1,100 in lost collections. So really, you're out of pocket, just over $4,000 just in that little example. And it's very, very for real, very much the reality of rental properties. But this is generally more of how it looks. Our rent's $1,100 a month, our mortgage, tax, and insurance $700 a month, and then we have an additional. We should be allocating at least another $300 a month for all these other things I've talked about. And The reality most of the time is, it's not going to be necessarily another $300 that comes out of your pocket every month, because when we have something that happens, when a tenant moves out, that's an expense that's going to happen at one time. Now, if you spread it out over the 12 months, it equals out to these numbers. But the reality of how it generally happens is, your AC unit goes out. You got to replace your AC, $3,500, $4,000. That's going to happen at one time. So now you're trying to spend the rest of the year making all that money up just to break even. So what happens if your AC goes out and you have a tenant move out in a year's time? I can't tell you how many times over the years scenarios like that have happened to me. Now I'm out $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000. Now it might take me a couple years to get back up to that even number, especially if I'm only bringing in, a cash flow of $200 a month, $225, $175. It's going to take me a long time to recoup that money. So that's why when I talk about buying with equity, buying properties at discounted prices, this is to account for all these things that are going to happen to you when you have rental properties. It's just part of the game. But I still love owning rental properties. It's still a very great thing to do. And it's a very, very satisfying way for us to build and accumulate wealth. And that's what we work on in our rental businesses. So let's talk about this, rental properties. How much can you pay for a rental property? Well, the biggest factor in determining your maximum offer is the cost of your money. This is really, really majorly important is the cost of your money. Where you're going to get your financing, and what is that financing going to cost you? This is something that we all need to really be thinking about. And there's, like I said, I mentioned earlier on, there's a wide variety of ways that we can finance properties or refinance properties. But in the beginning, all I ever thought was that I had to use, I could only do conventional financing. In my early years of buying rental properties, that's what I did. I used conventional financing. Everything had to be in my name. I couldn't put it in an entity name because it wasn't allowed. And I had to follow all the rules of conventional financing. Now, also the reality back then was I was doing very small rehabs on these properties. They didn't need tons of work. So as a value player, and I'm buying properties deeply discounted with a lot of problems, I can't get a conventional loan. They would not qualify me because the property needs too much work. So what's going to be our alternative with that? Our alternative is going to be using a hard money lender, potentially a private lender, which I use private lenders. So you're going to have to be finding your money to take that property down with some form like that, some sort of method like that. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, that's what I did. Like I said, I always went with the private lender aspect of it, but most people go with hard money and do it. I'm not saying don't do it. I think you should do it. But let's kind of look at some scenarios here. So, when I talk about all-in cost, and the example I'm giving you here, all-in cost for me means the acquisition of the property. So however much that property cost me and my rehab on that property. I don't include my closing cost in my all-in cost. So in this scenario, I'm all in a property at $80,000. And this is a scenario that I have done personally many, many times. And it could be, I could have bought that property for $40,000 and I did a $40,000 rehab. I could have bought it for 60 and did a 20. I mean, it doesn't matter how those numbers shake out, but my all-in cost is the important number here. So my all-in cost is $80,000. So let's say I get a hard money loan with 12% interest, but that's going to put my payment at $800 a month. That's just for my interest payment to my hard money lender. I still have to add my taxes and insurance and any other holding cost into that number while I'm rehabbing that property, taking it down and rehabbing that property. But then what I do is I get this done as soon as possible. In this scenario, I want to get this rehab done as fast as I can and get a tenant in that property as fast as I can, because this is costing me a lot of money right now. But then I go and I am able to refinance out that property. And let's just the example I've got here And like I said, these numbers can be very different. These are just examples to help you understand. So I get a 7% interest rate on a 20-year amortized note, which, a few years ago, that was pretty common number, 7%, 6.5%. And there's a lot of them out there right now. That's where their numbers are, and maybe even higher than that. So that's a very realistic number. And a 20-year AM on this, with a lot of guys out there, this is a very, very for real number with a lot of lenders right now. But what does it do? I just dropped my payment from $800 down to $620 a month. That's $180 decrease in money coming out of pocket. I still have my taxes and my insurance that I have to pay, but I just put $180 back in my pocket to help cover some of those expenses we were talking about a few minutes ago. But what if I could get a 5% interest rate on a 30-year amortized note, and it drops my payment down to $429 a month? I've almost cut my payment in half. So you see what that just did for that cash flow to come into my pocket, because I bought in the right scenario. Now, and to also, which I should have put up here and I didn't, if I'm all in at that $80,000 price to hit my 70% LTV, which is, plays a very important role, and it still fits in my sweet spot, my ARV would have to be like $115,000 on this house. And you see how my numbers work really well. At 115, that's a 70% LTV, loan to value ratio, and so I'm hitting all my numbers this way. But look, when I start refinancing it out, you see what I start doing with my payments. That cash flow starts putting that money back in my pocket, so I have money to pay any additional expenses that we need. And even more important, I don't care about a month-to-month cash flow. I want to know, do we have profit in the company at the end of the year? That's where the important part is. So start changing your mindset a little bit about that. Because one of the things that a lot of the gurus, when they talk about the cash flow, and they talk about, you talk about having a big expense like that, but in our mind we're still going, well, I'm still making this cash flow every month. You seem to forget that you just put $4,000 out of pocket because you got that monthly cash flow coming in. But that really shouldn't even be a part of what we're thinking. We should be thinking about what we've made, or did we make anything at the end of the year? Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. I've been on both sides of that. And when you're building rental portfolios, there's going to be a stabilization period. It's going to take time to do that. It's not going to happen overnight. So but see how I maneuver through these things. And right now, I can tell you, we're refinancing 3 properties right now, and I'm getting my money at 4.75%. Unbelievable low. That's super, super low. So right now, we can get some very low money, low percentages on our money. And so, this is pretty easy stuff to figure out. And really, all I do to figure this out is I go on an amortization calculator on the internet to do this stuff. I'm not, like I say, this doesn't take rocket scientists to figure this stuff out. This is really basic stuff that you can go and do, and you can set yourself up for success before you even get to that point. You're going to have success, and you're going to be able to do these things. So, keep this stuff in mind. So let's talk about rent ratio a little bit here. Rent ratio is very, very important to me, and I've heard people quote me on what I say on rent ratios a lot. But I want to really try and get a really good understanding with everybody here, so you really understand what I mean when I talk about rent ratio. Rent ratio for me is something that I start. Like I said, I've got a criteria, and I start all my evaluations the same on every deal, no matter what. Doesn't mean I can't change it based on that particular deal. But I always start my rent ratio off with an evaluation of 1.8%. And if I can hit a 1.8% rent ratio going into a deal, I know I'm going to have great success. And this example, I hope, will show you that. Now, like I said, it doesn't mean that I can't change my rent ratio based on a number of factors, based on the cost of my money. because that, I can certainly change my rent ratios based on what I pay for my money that I can get. But I'm not going to start my evaluation that way, because if it works out, and I've bought many properties like this, where we'll just go right into this example I've got here. I've got I've bought a lot of properties. I've got, I don't know, a good handful of properties that I'm all in at $65,000. And this is a simple example. Just I want a simple number so I could make it really clear for everybody. So if I'm all in at $65,000 and I've got a property that ARVs at $100,000, well, a 70% LTV on $100,000 is $70,000. So I'm in really good shape. I'm less than 70% on this deal in this example. So actually at closing, I could probably get money back, a few $1,000s back to cover my closing cost on this type of a deal, which I probably would do. So now I am zero out of pocket in this deal. And I've done this many times. We have done this on many, many, many properties. Zero out of pocket. That's a great position to be in. But at the same time, I'm not using conventional financing either. And that's how I'm able to do that as well. But let's look at the rent ratio side of this. So if I'm getting $1,200 a month rent, and I've got properties that fall right into this scenario, this is a scenario of rental properties I have. I get $1,200 a month. My all-in cost is $65,000. That gives me a rent ratio of 1.8%. At a 12% interest rate, or we took it down at 12%, like I showed you on the last example, that would put my payment at $715 a month, plus my taxes and insurance and all that. This is just my interest payment, $715. So now, if I go in and refinance this out, like I just told you, I'm getting 4.75% money. I take that 12% interest rate and I drop it down to 4.75%. That's going to drop that payment down to $200 something. I mean, I didn't do the math to figure out what that was, and you can figure it out yourself. It's a real simple calculation. But look what I just did to my payment. I just dropped my payment down to very, very low numbers, and I'm getting $1,200 a month rent. So now, did I just increase my cash flow on that property to $750, $800, $700, whatever that number is? And then now I've got room, I've got money to pay the taxes, the insurance, put money up for repairs, pay for management, cover all those expenses. And I should still have $300, $350 left after I have paid those expenses. That's why I start my numbers that high, because now I took my rent ratio from that 1.8 and I just took it to, a 3%, a 3.5%. These are very real numbers that you can do this with. These are the types of deals that are out there now. I just showed you the 3 deals I bought. All of them hit a 70% LTV. And like I said, I didn't even go into what the rent ratios are, but the rent ratios will fall very close into this example right here, with the exception I won't take those properties down at 12%, because I pay a lot less for my money right now, depending on who I borrow from on this deal. If I go with a private lender on these 3 properties, the private lender I will use to do all 3 of these properties with, I pay 8%. But when I refinance it out, I'll still refinance it out at 4.75% to 5%. But I also threw this out to one of my bankers to see if they'll just do it out of the get-go, because the houses are already rehabbed. So I might start my money off at 4.75% or 5%, and never have to make and do a one-time closing because of the situation of the properties. I don't have to rehab these properties. So you see the power of who you're using to finance is everything. And when you start to want to be able to change your numbers around a little bit, this is how you can do that. Get a little creative. Find people that can help you. talked. I mean, I didn't find these lower interest rates by just, sitting in the office and not making phone calls. I got on the phone with bankers, with lenders. There's a lot of different types of lenders out there. Get to know all of them. Find out what their criteria is. Find out how they can help you. How they're, and we use different lenders for different situations. Different lenders can help you in different ways. So I encourage you very much to get out there and try and find these things, get these things set up. So when you come across these deals, you can move quickly on them. Like I say, even if I go with my banker on, I'll still be able to close this deal in 30 days or less, because I've got a very good relationship with this bank. We've done a lot of deals together. So I want to do everything I can to set you up to have the greatest success possible. And if you follow these steps and put them into how you do business, then these are steps that we've always had great success with, and I would love to see you do the same thing. So you should have a very good idea of how you need to buy rental properties. Now, just because I buy them this way, that's not the only way out there to buy them. There, like I say, you can follow anybody's methods you want, but the method that I use, I think I've shown you how profitable you can be with rental properties. You will need to figure out the maximum allowable offer, that formula based on all the factors that I've gone over. And it's going to be different for everybody a little bit, and it's based on your own situations. There's no right or wrong here. It's about taking action and finding the best thing that works for you, and then going and making it happen. So everyone should be able to pay a different amount for rental properties and still have equally profitable results. And that's exactly what I want to see for you. So that's what I got for you today, guys. I hope this has been very informative. I love teaching this class. Like I said, I'm actually going to create some more classes off of this, because this is actually a 2-day class I've shrunk down into this hour workshop. But we haven't even talked about management. There's so many other areas about rental properties that we need to talk about, and I need to create some workshops for that, and I will in the future. But this is what we got for you today. I'm going to take questions in just a second here. As always, if anybody wants to contact me, here's how you can get a hold of me, through the Wealth Club or through SVSM. Also, we've got the QR code up here. Again, my book is coming out, Private Lender Roadmap. I actually, we got the proof here. We've approved the proof. So these are in production, being printed right now. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll be getting them. If you would like a free copy, I would love to send you a free copy. And we also will have it in ebook form too. So hit the QR code and, get so we get your email address so we can get you a copy of it as soon as we get everything in. Or if you just want to email us at svsm@svsmllc.com, we'll be happy to get you a book as well. I want everybody to have a book. These are all free books, and want to get that education to you as well. So with that being said, let's start taking some questions. Angie, what you got?
Okay. Oops. Hang on.
A little feedback there.
I'm not sure why, but
So we're making some adjustments here so we don't get some feedback here.
someone wanted to know if they can get a copy of the slides.
We will do. We'll post this again tomorrow, I guess, for to replay again. So it'll be going back out again. So you'll be able to see it again. I hope that's, if you're asking that, then we'll be getting it back out to everybody. Definitely, we want you to look at it again. It's all about you learning and hopefully following some of these things that I do to help give you better success.
So I think you said that you included the acquisition cost, but not the closing cost when you calculate, or I'm sorry, when you're evaluating the deal. Why is that? Is it because closing costs are tax deductible?
Well, no, I mean, when I'm figuring my all-in cost, for my numbers, I just figure my acquisition of the property and the rehab of the property. Now, oftentimes, because the way that I buy the property, I can close I can include my closing cost in my numbers, and so when I'm borrowing that money, I generally include that number. But to get to have a better accurate number, because closing cost is also based on a percentage of the deal, and that's a fluctuating number, and it's usually for the rental properties I buy, it's not a huge number, so I don't get too concerned with that. I'm just worried about the acquisition and the rehab costs, and that's what I could use for my all-in number. Yeah, if you can't hear Angie, then just let her know or write it in, and we'll adjust again. If I could, are you asking? I'm not sure how you're asking us. Do you want me to put together a slide showing you how all the numbers work? That's easy to do. Showing how I do my rent ratios and showing how I was doing the refinancing. If I think that's what you're asking, I can, we can do something, put that together. That's pretty simple to do, if that's what you want.
Okay. I'll try and do that. It's not hard for me, so that's fine. Okay. What has been your best source for finding good deals?
Best source for finding good deals. What has been my best source for finding good deals? Well, I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, we do our own marketing. I buy from some wholesalers right now. That's a little tough. I have people bring me deals from a lot of different avenues. I'm very big on marketing myself. I always let everybody know what I do, and I get calls. I've got realtors that bring me deals. Sometimes it's a very wide range of things that I do to try and find deals. I'm constantly out in front of people, and I think that over time that has I've been able to build momentum, and it's kind of like sometimes when I least expect it, I get a phone call from someone saying, "Hey, I've got this deal for you." But you have to do a lot of different things, especially right now. But I think getting out there, targeting some neighborhoods to market to is very important. Getting some flyers on doors, I think, works best. A little bit more work, but it's, in my opinion, probably the most effective. We get very good results when we do that. It's a combination of those types of things of how I find deals.
Where
Well, all three of these properties are in Galveston County. Oh, the question was, where do I find properties at $67,000? That's a great price. Well, it is a great price. There's actually a lot of neighborhoods throughout the greater Houston area that have properties that fall in that price range all day long. Galveston County is a great area for that. These three properties I'm getting, two of them are in Texas City, one of them is in Hitchcock. Great areas. There's also Dickinson, there's Richmond, Rosenberg, there's Humboldt, there's areas in Spring, there's areas in Houston. There's tons of neighborhoods out there because we're such a big, diverse area. There are tons and tons of neighborhoods that fall into those price ranges. I mean, I could list them out for a day. I mean, and I just happen to, since I've always been one to go out and get into neighborhoods and learn areas and neighborhoods, I stumbled across them, and there's a lot of them out there. Those are just a few of areas and counties that we work, and that's where I find those types of deals.
Okay. Do you deal with septic and well properties?
Yeah, the question was, do I deal with septic or well properties? And yes, I've bought properties with septic and well before. And how do I deal with them? It's going to be on an individual basis. It's going to, has the property been vacant? Is someone living there? Has a well been used? If it has a well been sitting for a year or so? There's some certain things that you need to do. If a well's been sitting, then you want to have a well company come out and clean that well, make sure that it doesn't have any bacteria in it, because if a well sits, it'll just get bacteria in there, and they can do a chlorine wash and generally take care of that. $250, $300, not a big deal. If it's septic and you're not sure about it, you can have an inspector come out and inspect. And that's generally about a $250, $300 charge for them to inspect a septic system. That's been my experience anyhow. I've never had problems with properties that I bought with well or septic. I know that you can have, if you've got to replace a septic, that can be very expensive. I've never had to do that, and everything's aerobic now, so you'd have to go with that. That's $10,000, $15,000 expense. If you have to dig a new well is going to cost you $8,000 to $10,000 to dig, to have a company come out and do all that stuff. So if it's in really bad shape, it can be a very big expense, and you would certainly want to account for that. But my experience has always not been too bad with well or septic.
With rent ratio going 0.8% is the minimum that you set. When would you go below 1.8%?
Okay, question was about rent ratios of 1.8%, that being my minimum. Well, no, and when would I go below that? Well, I use that as my standard. I don't use 1.8 as my minimum. In the beginning I did, but I don't use it as my minimum anymore. I use it as my standard. When will I go below that? It's going to be based on how much I'm buying the property for. And it's going to be based very heavily on the cost of my money, because like I was given the example of 1.8% with $1,200 a month, $65,000 all-in cost. I could take that. If I took that with those numbers, if I took that rent ratio down to 1.4% or 1.5%, and then I refinance it out at 4 3/4 or 5%, I'm going to go way over that 1.8% on that refi. So would I be willing to bring my rent ratio down on a good deal, on a property I like in a great area, to get into the property and take it down? Well, I certainly would, because I know when I refinance it out, I'm going to get my interest rate way, way, way lower. It's going to kick that rent ratio right back up to out over the top. But one of the points I was also trying to make with that is, if you do find a property and you are hitting that 1.8% rent ratio and you take it down, then when you refinance out, your numbers go super, super strong, and it puts you in a very, very strong position. But you can bring that number down if you're going to get your refinance money is going to be at a very good rate.
I'm looking to make sure I haven't missed anything.
And just going through stuff right now. Make sure we don't miss any questions for anybody.
We have a lot of technical issues today.
Yeah. I want to. we've had technical issues all day today, so I want to apologize to everybody for that. As a matter of fact, I'm not even on my computer right now, because my computer wigged out about an hour before we came on, and so we're kind of scrambling on our end today. So I want to apologize to everybody for that. And so if you did send a question and for some reason we're not getting it, and you really want to get an answer for it, please email that in to us. I want to be able to answer all the questions for everybody. Send an email to svsm@svsmllc.com, and I will get back with you, and I will answer any questions. If I haven't said your question, if there's anything you want to know, please let me know. I want to make sure that I'm giving you good information, and I want to make sure that you understand correctly, because sometimes this stuff can be confusing. I know for me in the beginning, it was really confusing for me. Please feel free to send anything in to us. Don't have a problem with that at all. Would love to answer anything we got.
It looks like everything has been answered. There's a question on here about anyone have a good lender who is asset-based, no W-2s?
Lenders that are asset-based with no W-2s. Yeah, I mean, I would say nowadays, we've got, there's Longhorn, there's ILS, there's Capital Concepts, there's Noble Mortgage. There's a lot of guys out there. But a lot of them are going to want to see a W-2s. They're going to see tax returns. They're going to get credit score. And some of them, even though they're asset-based, what they're determining with on some of that information they want from you is to what interest rate they're going to put you at. That's been my experience in the past. That if you've got a good asset, you've got a good asset, and any of those guys will lend on good assets all day long. But they want to, they're going to be checking you out. They're going to want all your information, and the higher your credit score, the lower you're going to be able to get an interest rate for, maybe the terms of whatever loan program they've got. And a lot of them got some similar loan programs, and they all have individual loan programs that other ones don't. That's why I was saying earlier, I think it's very important to get to know all of them, and then find out first off who you like best, whose personality you work with best, and then see what programs they have, and based on what you want to do the programs they have work for what you're doing? If they do, hey, great, work with them and build a good relationship. If not, just talk to the next guy and find out who's going to work best with you. Okay. Hey guys, it's good on the questions. I want to thank everybody for joining in today. Great class. Hope you got a lot out of it. Like I said, if you're not sure about something, or you have more questions and we weren't able to get to you because of some of the technical problems we were having, please let me know. More than happy to answer anything. We will be sending this out in a replay tomorrow. And thanks everybody for showing up, and look forward to next month. I don't know what my topics will be yet, but we'll have that announced in the next day or so. And we look forward to seeing you at the next workshop. Until then, everybody, you have a great day. Go and get tuned into us for our meeting on the 30th. Got Max Keller. Going to be a phenomenal meeting. He's going to be talking about some of the unique ways he markets, and he gets customers chasing him for his deals. Very, very powerful presentation. Great guy. Max and I do business together. You don't want to miss that. So we look forward to seeing you on the 30th at 7, and have a great day. Oh, and if you're a Platinum member listening, on the 21st next week, we have our mastermind online. So guys, thank you very much, and we'll see y'all very soon. Have a good one.